welcome to the Soccer Coaching Podcast. I'm your host, Scott Mowbray, and in each episode I will discuss the key topics that impact on football coaching from the foundation and youth development phases. Thanks for listening, I hope you enjoy this episode. David, welcome to the Soccer Coaching Podcast. It's great to have you on. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm very well, Scott, thanks. And looking forward to a chat today. Thanks for having me on.
No problem at all. Look, I'm going to be honest here. You're one of the guests I was keen to get on and have kind of wanted on for a while. And each time I thought about getting you on, or we've kind of had a conversation, like maybe through Twitter or wherever else, to try and get you on, it's almost been a different topic each time because that's the kind of person you are, right? You've always got something else you're working on. So I'm kind of glad that it's come now, because I think the topic for today and the concept we want to discuss is going to be really interesting to coaches. And I know something that you've put a lot of time and effort into putting out there and getting right. So it will be good. But before we get on to that, just a bit about how things are with you. Where are you and how are you?
Yeah, I'm very well, thanks. And I think you're spot on. You know, if we arranged this chat not too long ago, I probably would have been sharing some drill ideas, some practices, some theories and philosophies. And yeah, I'm working on something I think which is quite exciting and maybe a little bit different. So I'm excited to get into that. But yeah, I'm doing okay. Obviously, we've lived through a year of a pretty crazy situation with the pandemic, and it's been a tough time for a lot of people, particularly in sport. I'm really missing the coaching side of things. I guess the silver lining, if there is one, is just being able to do a little bit more of this and design practices and design environments and, you know, engage in podcasts myself and educate myself a little bit more. So hopefully soon, when we come out the other end of it, you know, everybody's ready to go. So yeah, no, I've been fine, thanks.
Good. And you are up in sunny Edinburgh.
Yes.
I know you're not from Edinburgh originally, but you know, how is it being based there? What's it like? It's a beautiful city, but how are you finding it there?
Yeah, we were obviously speaking a little bit off air about how beautiful it is, and we ended up talking about Edinburgh more than we ended up talking about football. You know, I love it. I love it here. It's great. It's a shame the world's obviously in this lockdown, and particularly in Scotland, we're still in this national lockdown. Yeah. I mean, the year, as I say, has been difficult, but you know, I actually became a dad in January 2020, and then we went into lockdown around March. So for me, you know, I won't get this time back. You know, spending a year in the house, albeit working from home, but with my wife and with my daughter, up in Edinburgh, lovely walks, lovely parks, you know, etc., etc. The year for me has been something a little bit special, actually. And you know yourself, Scott, working in sport, you know, I would normally be out late evenings and giving up my weekends and volunteering, etc. So as much as it's a tough situation, I sympathise with what a lot of other people are going through. For me, it's not been the worst year, to be honest.
Yeah, 100%. I think it is, different strokes, different folks, right? Things are pan out in different ways, different people, but you make the best of what you can. And, you know, with a bit of good fortune and everything else, and hopefully people have survived it with their sanity and their job still, and, you know, and can see the positives out of it. But having a baby at that time, that was good timing. So that, you know, well done. Congratulations.
Yeah, no, it's been lovely. Thanks.
Good. And little one's all good? So
yeah, she's
in a bit, 15 months.
To think, you know, obviously you're communicating with people over Zoom and phone calls and limited visits at the moment because of COVID. Yeah. So to think, you know, people haven't seen her for a year and seen, you know, how big she is and how quickly she's developed. Yeah. You know, it's been a quick year in some respects. It's a bit crazy. So yeah, she's a year old now, and it's flown by, to be honest.
Yeah, it does go quick. Yeah, well, congratulations.
Thanks.
Well, David, I think there's a couple of things we always like to start off with, and really just it helps listeners to get a background of kind of who you are and like what you've been doing, and also some of your kind of your philosophy and principles. So, if you don't mind, just firstly, just sharing with the listeners, you know, what your coaching journey's kind of been up until this point.
Yeah, I think my coaching journey is probably inspired a lot by my playing journey, and there's not a lot to talk about there, so don't worry, this won't take long. But you know, my playing experience wasn't necessarily a happy one. You know, I loved to play football. I loved to dribble and take people on and have skills. And I was looking at, you know, the Ronaldinhos and the Brazilian Ronaldo on the TV, and that's what I wanted to do. I wasn't necessarily good at it, but I wanted to dribble. And my playing experience was a very instruction-based coaching, you know, being told you play two-touch and, you know, run around the pitch. And, you know, at no point was it ever just play and have fun and freedom. You know, I think a lot of coaches I maybe I was just unlucky, but we're too busy trying to make us all, the next Kenny Dalglish or Archie Gemmill without actually stopping to consider, well, actually, we just want to play, and so that influenced my coaching journey. I got really invested in, obviously, I left high school and I went on to college and university to do a sports coaching degree. Got really invested in this idea that, if I put myself in that situation, I can maybe give kids a better environment than I had when I was growing up. Yeah, I worked part-time as a coach. I started off volunteering for the first couple of years, and then I got a few paid coaching hours. I was lucky enough to enjoy it enough and maybe build up my skills enough that I ended up traveling abroad for a couple of years. So I coached in the Middle East. I was in Dubai for a year, and then I was in New Jersey in America for about 5 years. And then I met my wife, actually, who lives in Edinburgh, and that's why we ended up moving back and living there. And then I started coaching with the Scottish FA, and I'm currently in at the Heart of Midlothian Academy as well, taking some teams in there. So it's been a journey. I'm working with the Scottish FA as well, and I do a bit of coach education with them on the entry level courses, the kind of level ones. I'm doing a lot of that at the moment, digitally and over Zoom and things like that. So yeah, that's a real quick kind of whistle stop tour of my coaching journey. But I think my biggest advice to coaches, if I'm already trying to share a little bit of my experience, is, my advice to the players is, if you want to learn to play football, then play football. My advice to the coaches is, if you want to learn to coach. I think my journey of coaching, 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. every day at university, doing sports coaching, finishing and then volunteer coaching 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. every day, going to the States and running summer camps and recreational programs, going to places like Dubai where, there's a big infrastructure and it's kind of, new concepts coming up there, and they're maybe just investing in soccer big time just now. This idea of, it's hard to replace that with all the coach education in the world and all the reading and all the textbooks. I think my coaching's been really defined by trial and error, really.
There's no substitute for the hours and the experiences, right? Particularly if you can get different experiences. And it sounds like that's what you've managed to do on your journey. Yeah.
And your coaching grows through what worked well. Your confidence grows to try something a little bit new. Your experiences, you're spot on, Scott. You coach in the Middle East, and there's a lot of, you go to Dubai and you've got 12 kids and 8 different languages in there, and you're learning a little bit about the importance of your body language and, how you communicate without talking. And when you've got the Scottish accent, you can't even rely on English, let alone any other language. So going over and having all these different experiences is it's worth its weight in gold, to be honest.
And what ages and abilities have you coached on that journey? I mean, has it been full across the spectrum, or have you kind of spent more time coaching a particular age and stage of a player's development, or has it been the whole way across?
Yeah, it's been all across, to be honest, particularly in America. I was coaching a semi-professional men's team. The bulk of my work was recreational and grassroots, because you're over there, and a lot of your listeners will be familiar with some of the opportunities over there and picking up as many coaching hours as you can. But I think all of that adds to the overall abilities as a coach. Now, obviously, I've still got loads to learn, but at the moment, I'm taking Heart of Midlothian women's under-20s team. So they're very talented female players, and they're under-20s, so a little bit older than obviously the other academy age groups. And that 15 years of experience I've got of working with kids, working with boys, working with girls, working in different environments, working with different family situations, that's growing your competencies and people skills and working with people. So regardless if you go in and you get asked to cover, the women's first team session, or you get asked to, cover the under 23s or something like that, you have people skills and you kind of know the journey because you've worked with kids that are 6, then you've worked with kids that are 12, then teenagers, and all this kind of stuff. And I think it just grows your confidence if you are going to step in and work with the more experienced or the higher ability adults, for example.
I love speaking to coaches that have got that kind of broad experience across different age range and different abilities, and then asking this next question, because that's always interesting to know how that fits in with them personally, and also does that change depending on the audience or the players they're working with. Mm-hmm. How would you describe your coaching philosophy and principles?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it does depend on who you're working with, and I think my coaching philosophy and principles, I think it always harps back to, well, it's not really about my coaching philosophy or principles, is it? It's about what coaching philosophy and principles do the players need. So if I have a look at a grassroots program where it's actually about the kids developing a love for football, and I think, well, my coaching and principles are tiki-taka and a 4-3-3 and playing out from the back, that's not going to marry in with the 5 and 6 year old kids that are in front of me. So yeah, I think that does come with experience and working across different programs. The bulk of my work at the moment, to be honest, is within the grassroots and the recreational game. And if I had to put something alongside as a coaching philosophy with those players, it would probably be understanding that they're people before they're players and engaging with them as people. Now, some of your coaches might be listening and saying, "Oh, well, I want to make them, go on and play for Scotland or play for England or become professional players." In my experience, you get a lot more from them performance-wise if you engage with them as people. First, what team do you support? How was school today? You told me it was your sister's birthday at the weekend. How did that go? And then you hear coaches, even at the top level, talk about how players will run through a brick wall for you, or they'll work hard for you. I think that comes from having a genuine vested interest in the people that you're working with. And if you are someone who's quite competitive at under 12 and under 11, and it's all about winning the league or winning this tournament, your players the kids are a lot more intelligent than we give them credit for. If you see them as tiny little commodities for you to win a tournament, they'll know that, and they'll know the second that they go through a growth spurt, or you find a better player, or someone moves into the area that plays in their position, you'll just put them on the bench and they'll know that. Whereas if you're genuinely investing in their development and in their development as people skills. So if I was trying, long story short, my coaching philosophy with the younger ones is it would be great to develop someone who's going to play for Scotland, but I think more about developing someone that I would like to sit next to in an office, because that happens. That happens. These kids grow up and you bump into them in the street, or they come and they volunteer on your programs, or they reach out to you over social media 10 years later, and it's great to hear what they've gone on to do. And if you're a small part of that journey, then great. I know a lot of your listeners, Scott, will be not so much grassroots and more into the academy side of things and the playing side of things. And I've got principles and philosophies there as well. I think it harps all the way back to this idea that for me, football's all about entertainment and human error and trying things, and that's why we won't go down the route of a VAR discussion, because I'm not a fan of it. So when I'm coaching the older age groups, and when we're talking about 11-a-side and a philosophy in regards to a principle of play, I like to see creativity. I like to see football played. I like the ball on the deck. I like dribblers, people that will take players on, harping back to the Kevin Keegan days. If they score 3, we'll score 4. When we get up to those kind of age groups, that's what I'm all about, to be honest.
Well, you make some great points. I mean, that whole thing about you've got to connect before you correct, right? I mean, that's what that comes down to. Yeah. You've got to know the players and have that relationship that you can then influence them and help develop them. But do you think, we do have listeners that work, a lot of those I know that are in grassroots football, and we have those that are in academies as well. But, whether you're an under 12 player in a grassroots team or an academy team, do you think there should be a different philosophy, or should we still have that kind of person before the player first approach? Even if you are, in inverted commas, a stronger player for your age, so therefore you may be playing at a slightly higher level, do you think it should be a different philosophy, or really actually it should always be about the person first, regardless of where they're playing?
It's really tough, I think. So if we go back to my coaching philosophy, number 1, let's have fun. Number 2, let's develop the person. Number 3, let's develop the player. And if you can design sessions and do programs that hits those 3 boxes, then great. If you have to sacrifice 1 or 2 of them, let's always keep the fun aspect in there. I actually think the word academy gets quite a bad rep sometimes, and all academies will be different. And I think some of them just have the facility and they have the power to just raise that third one up a little bit in regards to being a player. But I don't think they neglect the person or the fun aspect. I don't. And I was listening to, obviously I can talk about a lot of different podcasts and things I was listening to, but Hibernian Football Club here in Edinburgh, who your listeners will be familiar with, their sporting director, Graham Matthew, had a great podcast recently where he was just saying, we're still just a kids' football team. We still just have boys and girls at all age groups. We give them all the opportunities to come and play football and make friends and learn new skills. The only difference is, and I apologise if I'm misquoting Graham here, but he said the only difference is we have a pathway to become a professional footballer. Now, surely that can't be a bad thing. Now, unfortunately, there might be some academies that are tarnishing them all with the wrong brush, that they look at a 6-year-old and say, oh, you're not big enough, let's get rid of you. And sometimes there is no smoke without fire kind of thing, and maybe there are some that are doing that. But in my experience of talking to people that work within academies and visiting, they're not on cloud 9 and thinking every single one of their players are going to play for the first team. They understand that let's coach some transferable skills, let's line them up with some education. I know some academies that link in with local colleges and universities, and it's let's do our best by them to try and make them pro players. But if they don't, let's make sure they have another avenue. So yeah, no, I think the fun should always be there, and that's maybe just from my point of view. And I think for the most part, I think it is, to be honest. I think kids that came through an academy and then didn't quite make it, I think from the ones I speak to, they look back with such fond memories. They show you pictures of them in the strips and playing at that academy, and a tournament or a goal they scored when they were 13 or 14 or 15 years old. Those memories are worth their weight in gold. Why would you replace them, kind of thing? And I'm sure there's other stories out there. I've maybe just not heard them.
You make a great point. And actually, to be fair, not to be critical here, but I think maybe some of the academy systems have actually got it better run than some of the grassroots clubs, because maybe there's often more pressure, or not pressure, but there's more of an obligation, more of a reaction with grassroots players in some teams to be focused on results. And when there isn't academies are kind of maybe moved on past that. And actually there's some grassroots clubs that haven't quite got there yet. It seems crazy to say because it's recreational football, but they don't, I've seen coaches where actually the result means a lot more than it should do. And therefore they're not necessarily always putting the player first.
Yeah, no, I think everything in football, and sometimes as coaches and people that work in football and people that have an opinion on football, we're so quick to try and make everything kind of black and white, when really there's just so much space in between, and you need to be talking about individual clubs, individual players, individual people, as we've already spoke about, and their circumstances. And for some players, going into academy at 8 years old and staying there all the way up to the first team is the best thing that could happen to them. For some players, the best thing that could happen is they don't get that opportunity to 14 or 15, and when they get it, they're so driven to keep it because they've seen the other side of the coin. Yeah. For some players, the best experience may be they come into the academy at 8, 9, 10, they get cut or dropped or whatever the exit strategy is at 14, 15, 16. And then they take one look at the other side of the coin and they work really hard to get back in there, and that actual little is what they needed. And then some will drop out of academies because it's absolutely what's best for the person and the player. They might, as I was saying with my own career, if you can call it a career, but I just wanted to find somewhere I could have fun and play football and engage with my friends. And that might be what players, when they get to a certain age, decide that, the juice isn't worth the squeeze and I actually want to go and play out with this academy. It's, as I say, there's just so many variables and when it comes to and discussing these kind of things,
I've seen a fair bit of the resources you kindly share through Twitter, and there's some fantastic stuff on there. What comes through evidently in everything you put out pretty much is the fact that you're passionate about learning, development, and creating a culture or an environment around that. You can see it, and you're obviously constantly thinking about ways in which you can make that more effective for the players that you've got. And we'll talk about one of these concepts that you've got now in a second. Just before we get onto that, what do you mean when you speak about a conducive learning environment? Because you mentioned that a few in your resources you put out previously, and I think we could guess what that might mean. But when you talk about a conducive learning environment, what are you referring to?
Yeah, no, listen, I'm talking about this all the time just now, and obviously your listeners will know not to take everything I say as gospel, because I'll read a book next week and then this will blow all this out the water.
We all do that, yeah.
Yeah, at the moment, I'm so big on this environment-based approach, and it's probably because, as I say, when I was younger, I came through an instruction-based approach where it's, you must play two-touch, or you must pass the ball with inside your foot, or the coach... I think there's something really wrong if there's 15 kids running around and the coach is the voice you hear the most of. I see a lot within my coach education role. I mean, I see a lot of great practice and fantastic things, but we're here to learn, so we'll focus a wee bit on maybe the not so great things. Talking too much and maybe giving dated instruction, speaking about the journey of playing in the 1980s and the 1990s to kids who are going to play the game of 2030 and 2035, and I see a lot of this taking away the problem solving, almost as if the coaches kind of got a PlayStation controller, pass, dribble, shoot, do this, and then that kid moves, the dad gets a job in another area, he moves to another town, he works with another coach and doesn't know what to do because he's been joystick coached by Coach David Baird for the past 5 years. So I think there's a real danger of over instruction. And I can say from 15 years now being on the grass, probably the last 4 or 5 years really buying into conducive learning environments, I just think it's so much better. And I think if I've planned my session well and I set the environment right, if I'm talking a lot, I've maybe not done that. There's something wrong with my environment if I need to constantly be asking the players to do something or constantly explaining to players. And that's fine, that might happen, but I then need to go back to the drawing board and say, well, that wasn't quite pitched at the right level, it was too advanced, or area sizes weren't right. But no, I always talk about the environment. And one of the examples I give when I'm coach educating, for example, is Imagine you had 10 kids in front of you, all of different ages, backgrounds, ability levels, and you were doing a session on jumping up and down. That was the theme of your session, jumping, and you tried an instruction-based approach, right? Everyone stand in a line, bend your knees, jump up, higher, work harder, who can jump the most? And I would ask coaches to think about how long could you keep players realistically engaged in that and having fun in that environment. But instead of having that instruction, why don't you just build a bouncy castle? And they will subconsciously jump all day for you. They'll explore, they'll backflip, they'll get fit without even knowing it because they're jumping for hours and hours, and that's what I try and take that as a parallel to my coaching. I try and think, right, what do I want to achieve? So obviously it won't be jumping. It might be a lot of passing and moving. What do I want to achieve? And how do I create the environment where that is worked on constantly? And creativity, without all of my instruction and me kind of putting them in a box. This is how you must pass and move. Don't show them how the game should be played. Let them discover how the game could be played, and that's what I mean by a conducive learning environment. Hopefully that helps to paint the picture a little bit.
It definitely does. Is there anything that you would say are kind of must-haves in this environment? Are there things you say, Scott, if you're going to create a really good learning environment for your players, these are some of the things actually you want to make sure you've got in there, just broadly speaking?
Yeah, broadly speaking, yeah. And before I go into that, I'll just say this isn't all the time because then it becomes a bit monotonous. The majority of the time I think I'm creating conducive learning environments. And the must-haves that I think you're getting at, Scott, would be competition, for example. Kids love competition, whether that's what you really focus on and, just watch your terminology with winners and losers. But, they must be trying to achieve something and get a pat on the back when they do. Probably opposition, because that's the game we're trying to teach them. So someone trying to stop them from doing that. Probably some transition. So when the other players win the ball, they go. And I guess what I'm describing to you is this kind of conducive learning environment, this kind of games-based approach, which I'm massive on. But the reason I make the point that, that's not every session, I still think there's a place for, block practice and things like this. And there, of course, there's a place for some sort of instruction. Right, guys, get in twos and pass the ball, or pass the ball off the wall, or dribble in and out of cones, or keep it up. I think these block practices, so this kind of constant repetition without the things that I'm describing, will make you more proficient when you go into the environments that I'm talking about here. So, but it's just not leaning on that too much. If you're instruction-based coaching all the time, I think there's a worry that your voice just becomes kind of water off a duck's back kind of thing. Whereas if I can create an environment with competition, goals, hitting the back of the net loads when we're talking about young players, fun challenges, and we're going to come on and talk about a lot of this stuff, then if I do see something that I really need to instruct or I really need to address, they're going to listen to me because I'm not normally that way inclined when I'm saying, right, guys, hold it there, like, just for a wee second, or if I'm going over and chatting to a player, they'll listen more because they're not just, your voice doesn't just become water off a duck's back, as I say. It's kind of like, I was chatting to a coach once who was so softly spoken, and I told him why he didn't raise his voice, and he said, if I talk quietly, it means they have to listen. It's that kind of idea,
A very experienced teacher, when I first went to my first school, told me, the trick is to speak quiet, because the quieter you speak, the more the class has to listen in and stuff. And it's so true. It works really well. The minute you start shouting and getting louder, everyone else just gets louder. So if you talk quiet, everyone quiets down with you. So definitely a top tip there.
If you can marry that with making sure you actually speak to the player who needs to hear the messages. I used to be guilty of stopping the session and saying something that was relevant to 3 players, to 10 players. And you just need to watch you're not speaking to everyone and no one at the same time, because the 3 players don't actually know you're addressing them. And it just means so much more, particularly to young players, when you say, right, Scott, see, next time the ball comes, just a wee scan the shoulder will really help you, whatever with the decision making. And I can be coaching you, Scott, while the other 10 players are still getting this game-based approach, conducive learning environment, whatever it is that's running,
Do you know what? That's another great point. And we're not going to talk about interventions, but that is a great one. And I think one thing with that as well, what you do with the players, when you take them out of the moment, if you like, they can almost observe with you for just 30 seconds or so. And they can have the picture then paints 1,000 words as well. So you've got the they can watch for a second with you to see what's going on and what you're talking about. And then you put them back in the practice. And like you say, 8 players haven't just stood there for 30 seconds or a minute or probably 2 minutes listening to you talk to 3 players and lost interest and energy and got cold. You can keep it all going. And yeah, I guess it's all part of the toolkit, right? I know where this is going, and it makes complete sense now, because you've obviously looked at this very closely. You've obviously evolved your practices, and you've come up with a concept which is called Scoreboard Soccer, which I've looked at, and for me, it seems to embrace all these things you spoke about: games-based, a conducive learning environment, fun, challenging, all these things. Could you tell us if I've got that right, first of all, and if I've got that right, but what is Scoreboard Soccer?
Yeah, well, I'd start by making the point, and hopefully throughout our conversation, I can paint how it looks and how it feels and how your coaches that are listening can go and do it themselves. But essentially, it's just another, we spoke about the coaches toolkit. It's just another tool. It's just another practice design. Your coaches listening will like rondos and small-sided games and fitness exercises and game-related practices and condition games. And maybe by the end of our conversation today, Scott, some of them will think, I'm actually going to plan a wee bit of Scoreboard Soccer at my session next week, or we're going to do some sessions on Scoreboard Soccer. So, all it is maybe a new concept for coaches to hopefully embrace, and it comes back to this conducive learning environment. So if I can go on a little bit of a rant about what it is and try and explain it as best I can. I think there was a real culture change, certainly within this country, to this kind of games-based approach and this idea of letting the game be the teacher. And I am a massive advocate of that, and it's exactly what, as I was saying, is probably missing from my experience as a player. I wanted a lot more of that, and I always say, when we learn to ride a bike, we ride a bike. When we learn to play a guitar, we play a guitar. If you want to learn Spanish, you could have an instruction-based approach, or you can go live in Spain and you'll pick it up a lot quicker. And I think if you're a grassroots coach listening, and you probably know this already, it's very hard to replicate with a drill or a skill practice or game-related practice all the benefits of, say, small-sided games. There's defending, there's transition, there's attacking, there's running, there's hidden fitness, there's fun. So I probably, like many coaches, I bought into this idea of a games-based approach. All in. I was doing it so much, letting the game be the teacher, and it was excellent. But I guess with time, I started to pick a couple of flaws in it. Now, I still do loads of just let them play. But here's a couple of things that came to the surface, and this was me working with a good group of volunteers, a good group of coaches, having a lot of conversations about it. We split them into 4v4s, 3v3s, whatever it is. There's still some players who get the lion's share of the ball. There's still some players that maybe don't touch the ball. There's still some players that maybe aren't that engaged in small-sided games. So let's say I'm working with an under-11 group, and it's a kind of fun football session where you sign up and you come along. Some of them might be coming because they love football. Some of them might be coming to find out, do they love football? And if you throw them in an environment where they don't touch the ball and they don't even know the rules, so they're shy to get the ball in case they shoot the wrong way or they do something wrong, that let them play doesn't really work for that kind of group. So if any of your coaches are listening and thinking, how do I work with a mixed ability level? How do I challenge the players who are a little bit more talented in my small-sided games, and how do I support the players that need it within the small-sided games? And hopefully Scoreboard Soccer is something that you can go and try. I'm not saying it's absolute gospel and you're going to have loads of success with it, but I would love it, Scott, if your listeners gave it a try and then maybe fed back. So anyway, let's go on to what it is. So I was playing my small-sided games. We'll go right back to the start. We're playing 4v4, and let's say, there's a player, Scott, who's getting the ball, dribbles by everyone and scores. Can quite easily win it within 3 seconds, dribble by everyone and score. We'll all know the players I'm referring to. Now, you might be the coach that's inclined to say, must play 2-touch, or you must pass before the team can score. That instruction-based, the referee's not going to say that to that player, you must play 2-touch. I would never coach that out of a player. If you want to learn to pass, you need to pass. If you want to learn to dribble, you need to dribble. If you want to learn to take on 5 or 6 players, we need to let our kids take on 5 or 6 players, because it's worth its weight in gold. And I say it all the time. I never understand why the players that dribble but don't pass get a much harder time than the players that pass but don't dribble. Especially when dribbling's it's a much better skill to have in a game of football. Anyway, I'm going off on a tangent anyway. So I'm thinking, how can I, momentarily get this player out the way without taking away that creativity that I love, that spark that this player wants to dribble on? So what we decided was we added a scoreboard, or what's now became known as a scoreboard. I didn't have a name for it initially. I've been doing sessions like this for 5 or 6 years now. So Scott dribbles by everyone and scores, and I'm like, fantastic, Scott, come over and try and hit the crossbar for a bonus point. So I've got a crossbar challenge set up next to my small-sided pitch, and Scott thinks he's getting a big pat in the back and a big well done, and he sprints over with a big smile on his face because, let's be honest, crossbar challenge is fun. But he doesn't realise that the hidden benefit is everyone else can share the ball for a little second. And that's how it started, implementing these scoreboards, and I've got loads of these scoreboard games. How it evolved was realising, well, hold on, we don't just need to get Scott off the pitch for a wee minute. Let's say David's actually one of the ones that does show up and is not getting involved, and he's not getting as many touches. Can we actually praise the effort of David? David, I love that you tried to take a player on there, regardless of whether he gets by a player or not. I love that you've tried to take a player on there. Come and have a wee shot at the crossbar challenge for a bonus point. And I can tell you through experience and 5 years of delivering this way now, David will rush on desperate to try and take someone else on again, or desperate to do whatever it is you're praising within your environment, whether that's scanning or communication or dribbling or passing and moving. And listen, it doesn't have to be blanket for the whole group. It might just be you've been talking to a player about working on their first touch, and you can see they're really working on it, so you want to praise it. So hopefully that paints a bit of a picture, Scott, that Scoreboard Soccer, it's really just a motivational activity that runs alongside the game that I'm finding so many benefits of. You know, we do beat the goalie, we do crossbar challenge, we do ones that are a little bit daft, a little bit fun. I can share with your listeners, but we're finding that it's really, you know, engaging the players, and that's what it's all about, isn't it?
100%. And it'd be fascinating to have some examples of the type of games you played and which ones you found worked really, really well, so we can give the coaches some easy tries to give it a go when practice starts again. But before we go on to that, just a little bit about the actual concept itself then. So the best ideas almost sound like they're obvious ideas, don't they? But when you think about it, like, you know, okay, I can say I'm thinking back now, I kind of do some of this stuff, but I don't. I mean, in your example there, where we might want to create an overload, or if a strong player is dominating, I'd probably get the player who scored the goal to go and do a run round the back of the goal and back on the pitch. Almost becomes a punishment. You know, it's not punishment because you don't put it that way, but they're not getting anything out of it really to help them. They're just getting off the pitch for a minute and having a challenge. I mean, they're young, so they kind of enjoy the challenge, whatever it may be. But actually, if you take that challenge to be something much more positive, like actually another challenge because you've kind of excelled at this, trying to hit the crossbar or something else, that's a much better way of kind of solving that problem and creating opportunity for other players. It's a twist on what was happening, but in a much more positive way. And is that what this is about? It's trying to find ways to reward and recognize in the most positive way for each individual.
Yeah, and this is why it kind of grown arms and legs, and now I've got to the stage where, you know, I'm wanting to share the concept, and I've got all the session plans and animations, and they're completely free to your listeners. They just need to get in touch, and I'll circulate it, because the first scoreboard that we had was working with a young group, and it's all about having fun or whatever. The first scoreboard we had was this kind of called, it was Finding Nemo is what we called it, you know, and it was what can we set up as an activity next to the game that the kids are going to really want a little shot of. So we put out loads of cones, and that was like the coral reef or whatever it's called. We got like a 5p piece, and we hid that underneath one of the cones, and that was Nemo. And it was the first player to find Nemo wins. But the only way you can find Nemo is the coach says, well done, come over and have a look. 5 seconds, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They look under a cone and that kind of stuff. And just that wee fun game. We have another one called Connect 4 where they put balls on top of cones. It's the first team to get 5 footballs on top of the cones. But that wee fun thing just really, really, really engaged them. And I can't tell you, and hopefully your coaches will experience this, the absolute joy on a young player's face when he or she comes over, it lifts the cone and finds Nemo, and they've won the game for their team or for them as an individual. And then you're making that coaching point of, you know, well done, Sarah. What was it you done that made you come over anyway? She's like, oh, I said well done to one of my teammates. And now all of your other players are sitting up being like, right, if we play again, make sure I'm saying well done, or make sure I'm spreading out or passing and moving. And that kid jumps in the car and says, I won the game, I found Nemo. You know, it's a great feeling. But I guess the point I'm getting at, our first scoreboards were, you know, Connect 4, putting a ball on top of a cone, knots and crosses, finding Nemo. But then it was with the evolution of saying, well, actually, can we work on a little bit of football while we're over here? And that's where things like the crossbar challenge came, and beat the goalie, and headers and volleys and all this kind of stuff, and hit the post and, you know, chip it into a bin. And there's a little bit of kind of hidden learning in there within itself, just using the football and using the technique. You know, we have one, for example, that the scoreboard is a, you know, 5x5 box, you know, 4 yellow cones, and you're 15 yards away and you're trying to take a throw in for the ball to bounce in the box. And if it bounces in, you get a point. Now, while 99% of your players are benefiting from a games-based approach, you know, the game's still going on, you could spend a couple of minutes with Scott on his throw-in technique and see if he keeps his feet on the ground and he releases it above his head and it bounces in the box. You're just saying, well done, get yourself back on the pitch. But see if there's something you want to address there. You can coach a player while the rest of them are getting a games-based approach. Now, we obviously were exchanging some emails and talking about kind of practice through play, which is a document that I'll share with whoever wants it, and it's, you know, 50 practices and 50, you know, games. And Scoreboard Soccer is a bit of an evolution of that, because like, can we just do them together? Can we be practicing while we're playing? And can we? So hopefully I'm painting the picture. But that's a couple of the scoreboards we have. You know, trying and pass a ball and knock a ball off the cone. You can set up a 1v1 grid. So we're talking about how you can do some technique and do some coaching. So, you know, say, Scott, you're a player that the coaches have identified to really work on their 1v1 defending. The scoreboard's a 10x10 box. you're inside that box, I come across, if I can dribble past you, I get a point for my team. If I can, I don't, and then I quickly get back on the pitch, and I guess what I would say, the main thing about the scoreboard soccer concept is, there's a concept, it's an activity that runs alongside your games, but now take that and come up with your own scoreboards. Your coaches will have ones way better than I've ever thought of. I've got some tried and tested ones, as I say, if they want them, take them and run with them, but they'll come up with some stuff that works for their players and their groups.
I would definitely want to see some of the things that you've done. That would be great as a starting point. And I could see how that would definitely get involved with coaches, and rightly so, right? Because what you want to take the stuff and adapt it for your personality and for your players, right? To make it work for you. So it's really exciting to listen to it. And
I'm sorry to cut in, Scott, but the best way you design it for your players is you get them to design the scoreboards. You get them to pick the teams, you get them to pick the rules. And, I'm talking about the younger players here, but it goes all the way back to investing. If you get the fun right and you get the person right, then they'll give you more as a player, and they'll keep coming back and keep working hard for you. So some of the best scoreboards we've got were designed by players. The players love football and they love board games as well. So we play Snakes and Ladders. It's a red team against a yellow team. There's a board game of Snakes and Ladders with a red piece and a yellow piece on it. If I do something well, if I score a goal, if the coach praises me, I come over, I roll the dice. I put the piece up, and the first one to get to the end wins. You should see the heartbreak when they hit a snake, and you should see the elation when they hit a ladder. It's great, and that's one we do in particular where we'll have maybe 2 or 3 pitches going of small-sided games, and we've got 2 or 3 pieces on the board. There's a yellow team, a red team, a blue team, a green team, all playing small-sided games. It's who can get up the ladder first. So you get away from this idea of complacency or disengagement, because I'm the blue team, you're in the green team, we're playing a small-sided game, and then we're winning 10-0. Doesn't matter, because the red team over there are further up the board. We need to keep working hard and keep going, and then you rotate the teams and whatever. So again, hopefully that paints the picture. Yeah, you asked me what my favourite ones were. Some of the board games are great. So you'll be familiar with the game kind of Guess Who. Yeah, so we have a red team against a blue team. We have the red Guess Who board game behind one goal, the blue the other. As a coach, I pick a character, and the first one to find out who I am wins. The kids score a goal, they run over. Does he wear glasses? Is that male or is that female? And they run over and they flick down it. And again, you should see the elation of when they win these games. They absolutely love them.
You must have plenty of equipment in your you go to your sessions. I've seen lots of stuff at training sessions, including Subbuteo and stuff like that, but I'm not seeing Guess Who yet.
Yeah, and this is the thing, your coaches, half of your coaches are probably tuned out. That sounds ridiculous, but that's me talking about potentially the younger ones. When you start to get a little bit older, we know small-sided games is a great pre-season fitness, little pick-me-up if you've had a bad defeat. But your scoreboard might be free kicks. You set up a line of mannequins, you set up a goal, you put a ball down, and it's actually quite hard to do individual technique like free kicks and corners on the side. It might be 1v1 with the goalie. The scoreboard is the coach throws a ball in, goalie rushes out, and you go 1v1. So this is what I mean, how we're seeing it growing. Arms and legs and loads of different things you can do with it, and it's so rewarding as a coach when I'm actually thinking about a specific group of 9 and 10-year-old girls that you couldn't get them to engage. This specific group I have up here in Edinburgh, you couldn't get them to engage in a game of 4v4. But when we introduced a scoreboard that was the egg and spoon race, you put the egg on the spoon and you run around the cone and you get back on. If you do it without dropping the egg, that's 1 point. If you do it with a ball at your feet, that's 10 points. There's a wee bit hidden of small touches and balance, and they're just working so hard. The engagement within the game is great because they want to be engaged by the scoreboard. Now, they're not all going to be that way inclined. See, for some of them, the game's fine. The game engages them fine, and they'll play small-sided games for an hour. But some of them need this little... It's just a motivational tool, really, isn't it, Scott? I hope I've explained it well enough.
Oh, David, you explained it very, very well. And for me, it's just literally taken the Pandora's box off, because there's just so much to come out of there. I just keep writing down words to come back to, because there's so much there. And well, look, I've written down things like behaviour and culture. You could use this. We not often, but you do hear about, coach will say, oh, I've got a challenging under 12 kid that, just won't engage in the session. What can I do and stuff? And it's always about the session, really, and how you and the practice you put on, as well as your communication, stuff like this. But actually, if you use these concepts, the behaviour and the culture can work with each individual. So as long as you know your players, you can find out, okay, what makes them tick. Like you say, for some it's the game itself, for some it's the reward and the recognition and whatever else, but it's all in there. You've got ownership in there. You've got complete individualization. So if you want to look at, okay, what do I need to work on with my players? You made a great reference with regards to the throwing one. We coach various ages, but our under-9s team, we've still got some players that struggle with throw-ons. We've done it for 3 years, but but we've never really worked on it because it's not a priority for us. We can live without it. We're not doing it. But actually, what a great way to crack that nut for that one or two players without even them knowing they're doing it, So there's just so much in it.
And if I was to go on that one, a little bit further, and you've reminded me of one of the best tools is, so many coaches listening, and I've got a little bit of an exit strategy now. Whenever any coach asks me, they look at me as an experienced, coach for 15 years, and they say, how can I get my players to spread out? Scoreboard Soccer, praise that behaviour. How do I get my players to pass and move more? Scoreboard Soccer, spread that behaviour. There's so many things that I'm just using this as my kind of, go-to now. But let's say, for example, your scoreboard is passing the ball to try and knock over a cone, for example. It's a kind of passing scoreboard. Then that might actually just relate to the theme of your session, where within the game, the thing that I'm going to praise more often than not. So let's say we take it as a whole session, and I do a passing activity, and then I do a passing progression, and then we go into Scoreboard Soccer, and you get them playing, and you get them moving, you get them going. Then that might be a little coaching point. Right, guys, hold it there for a second. What did we work on in today's session? Passing. Right, what do you think I'm going to praise within the game now? Passing. And you say, right, Scott, that was a great pass. Come and try and do another pass to hit the ball off the cone. So coaches that are listening, they need to understand, and they will do, that they can still manipulate the game environment. Play the game with throw-ins if you're working on throw-ins. And when Scott does one, because you say you've been coaching your kids at this for 3 years, when Scott does one where his feet are on the ground and he releases it above his head, Scott, brilliant, come over to the throw-in scoreboard. I'm lucky enough that the pitch I do Scoreboard Soccer on, there's an 11-a-side goal at the side, so we get the kids to take throw-ins and try and hit the crossbar with a throw-in. And again, it's sheer elation when they do. So hopefully that shows as well that a couple of other things you can use it for.
You've mentioned quite a few times, or at least referred to, I think, quite younger players. But my gut feeling is this would work with most players. We're all competitive. We love a challenge. I can see certainly older players, like the teenagers, but even adults kind of embracing this. Anyone loves a challenge. Is that something you would support? Does it work across the age groups?
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't know what age your listeners are, and hopefully it's okay to say, but one of the guys told me it'd be great for a stag do. It was kind of, you take a shot of whiskey or whatever's the scoreboard every time you score, and because they love 5 sides and they love something a little bit daft, and I'm like, well, whatever floats your boat kind of thing. But yeah.
But right, that could be an under 14 to be fair, but yeah, I'm going to assume he's older.
Yeah, he's a bit older. And no, absolutely. I mean, I would enjoy the games myself, particularly if it is working on. So here's a scoreboard for you, Scott. We're playing 5-a-side, which I would be fine with. I'm playing 5-a-sides. But every now and then the coach will say, right, David, well done, come over. Coach throws up a ball and I'm trying to hit it on the volley, because that's something that older players would be capable and confident and they would want to do. Set up your player so let's talk about the 11-a-side game and let's talk about something a wee bit more advanced. Set up your player who takes the corners to hit a corner, and every time someone goes to the scoreboard, there's a player there with a bag of footballs putting a corner in, and I just jump up and header it or chest and volley or do whatever, then I get myself back on the pitch. All of a sudden the next player comes. So we've got the Scoreboard Soccer game running, but we've actually taken a player out for him or her to work on 20, 30, 40 corners within the practice, whatever it may be. Yeah.
So can I ask, so I'm going to spin it around because it sounds wonderful and I get it, but there was obviously going to be nothing runs without its bumps and challenges. So let's look at some of the challenges that you might get as a coach facing this so we can prepare ourselves if we're going to give it a go. Do you need more than one coach to make Scoreboard Soccer effective? Because it sounds like obviously you can have 2 things going on and everything else and to keep the score. Have you done it on your own and has it worked, or has it worked better if you've got someone supporting you as well?
I'm fortunate enough that with my experience and how comfortable I am with it, that I can work it, and it will depend on your club, your culture, and maybe even your FA, for example. So, is it a ratio of 1 to 8 kids, 1 to 12 kids? Because now we're actually talking about, regardless of the activity, you need to have a good adult to kid ratio to make sure everyone's safe and working hard. I'm quite comfortable with 2 games of 4-a-side running, and the scoreboard's in the middle, and it's something along those sides. But I would say another coach would add benefit to that, particularly if I want to utilise that scoreboard for a little bit of coaching. So that's the probably the first thing that I would stop doing if I was on my own. I wouldn't actually be able to go in and coach the kids while they're at the scoreboard. But yeah, a second coach would, of course, that would benefit. And what I would say as well for your coaches that are listening, become really comfortable with it before you get adventurous with it. Just say, right, well, I was expecting 16 players. 8 have shown up today, as we all know happens. I'll just try a wee bit of that Scoreboard Soccer game. We'll play 4v4, and I'll use this motivational tool of the scoreboard. But I know we're kind of 45 minutes into our chat, and I've not even gone into the kind of hidden benefits that we're finding as well. And this is why I'm putting it together as a resource and sharing it, because yes, we'll create a conducive learning environment where David's saying do Scoreboard Soccer, and that will be great. But let's not take away some of the fantastic experience and knowledges that the coaches listening are going to have. You can still coach within this environment. So this is, for me, and if I can back myself with my coaching knowledge a wee bit, the biggest opportunity Scoreboard Soccer gives me is it looks like a game of football, because, you're talking about hurdles and what some coaches might come to, like, oh, that's a bit daft, getting subbed off for scoring a goal. What's that all about? And I'm like, no, but what it's actually about is I've scored a goal, I'm running to the scoreboard, the other team grab the ball and start playing. My team are now a man down or a player down, whatever it may be. It's a 4v3 overload. And now you have attacking overloads, you have defending outnumbered, you have trying to slow down the force so I can get a recovery run back in to help. It's if you win the ball, pop it back to me and I'll score again. Are those 4 players going to commit all 4 forward and forget about me running in behind, essentially, coming back from the scoreboard and staying up? So you can probably tell by the passion and the tone of my voice, there's so much hidden learning in there. 4v3s, 3v4s, delay and attack, and it gives you that conducive learning environment where my players are going to be exposed constantly to these transitions, these overloads, these underloads, etc. And see, when they start to pick it up, it's great. But see, as a coach, if you recognise, okay, they're not picking it up, they keep bombing forward 4v3, losing it, and then the ball gets popped into the player, come back from the slow one. There's a coaching point for you. Go in there and coach. Right, guys, 4v3, we need some width. Someone go up there, gives a bit of length. But if we lose it, someone drop back, gives a wee bit of depth, just so we don't get hit on the counter-attack. And go in and use your coaching knowledge, and your coaches listening will have more than me. And coaching the game, I did a webinar recently on Scoreboard Soccer, and it was on the Saturday. On the Tuesday, Mbappe scored against Barcelona with an unbelievable 3v2 counter-attack. You had Longley, and I think it was maybe... wouldn't have been Arojo because he was injured. It might have been Longley and Piqué actually trying to slow down an attack while Busquets is bombing back, and it was 3v2. The ball went wide to Mbappe and he scored, and it just looks so much like Scoreboard Soccer. You constantly get these situations, 3v2s with someone bombing back from the scoreboard. Then the next night, I think it was a Wednesday night, you had Haaland from Dortmund scoring a goal where it was a real overload. It was 4 against 3 with someone bombing back. So these are the situations that... So I'm kind of going off on a wee bit where if it's just kids you're working with, you might just want to let them play because first and foremost, football's, Scoreboard Soccer's fun. But also, if you're a little bit older, a little bit more experienced, you can coach them so much within it. It's unbelievable.
I guess it's scalable, right? You can work it according to the players that you've got and the age and stage that they're at, which is the beautiful thing about it. That's why I think it's Pandora's box. You've literally just taken the lid off something and said, look, wow, you can almost do anything you want with this. It's a concept, but how you frame it and use it, it's really down to your skill set, your confidence, the players you've got, the tools and everything else. But you can keep it simple, but you could do things much more complicated. I mean, I was thinking then when you were talking about setting challenges for the players, I mean, in theory, if you had enough support and resource, you could have individual challenges. So actually you could be playing a 6v6 or 7v7 game, and each player can have an individual challenge where if they meet their challenge, then they can go and do something on the reward pitch, if you like, for meeting that challenge. So you could be so individualistic about how you approach it if you had the time and resources to plan a session like that, and it could work for every player you've got access to.
Yeah, and I think for me, I think there, like, your eye needs to be your coach kind of thing. Like, if I'm going to set Scott the challenge of, I want to see you use your left foot a little bit more, sometimes I think that can become overprescribed, where it was actually set up perfectly to use his right foot, and he's tried to use his left just because I've told him. So for me, I probably don't have preconceived ideas of what I want to see. I see what they do, and I see if it's praiseworthy. So if I have that younger boy or girl who is more than capable of dribbling by 4 or 5 players, I'm maybe not going to praise the fact that they did a step over, because I know that by their skill set, that was, whatever. But maybe that player's not tracking back ever, and the one time he or she tracks back and makes a slide tackle, regardless of whether he or she won the ball, I'm saying, look, I love that you walked back that time. Coming, as long as the scoreboard's fun and it's engaging and they want to do it, and through trial and error, we found out some of them don't work. I'll give you an example. We love board games. One of the coaches I'm working with brought along Jenga, and that's the scoreboard. Here's the downfall of that. Nobody wants to do anything good, because the more you're over at Jenga, the more chance you have of losing.
Yeah.
We had to find that through trial and error. So again, I mean, I could talk about all these different games that we have, and but I'm more than happy to share it. And all I would ask in return from your coaches listening is a wee bit of feedback. You know, does it work with the players? Do they engage as much as the players I'm working with are? And hopefully, the answer is yes. Hopefully, they enjoy it.
Well, you've explained it excellently. If it's okay, at the end, we'll just do a summary about where you can get the information and share out your details. That's okay. But I just want to check. We may have covered this already, Dave, but just in case we haven't, where would you see that you use Scoreboard Soccer in like players' long-term development?
Well, the first one I think is always going to be consistent when it's appropriate. You know, if I mean, obviously I've volunteered in the grassroots game for a long time, and if you show up and the football's in someone else's car and all you've got is one ball and 4 jumpers, you know, you might say, right, let's do a wee bit of scoreboard soccer. If the numbers you didn't plan for show up, you might do right this. And remember, the coaches can still manipulate that game environment. It might be 4v4+1, there might be offside lines, it might be 7v7, it might be a 4-goal game, it might be a 6-goal game. You know, there might be, again, it's just a tool to add to coaches' armoury, and they might find a way to do it. But for me, the second one, the longer term development, it's helped my players tenfold, the ones I've been doing it with for 5 or 6 years. And it was actually just because of a national lockdown and being able to use Zoom and webinars that I started sharing this idea and getting really good feedback. I would still just be coached on the pitch and not thinking any more of it. But, you know, I went on the furlough scheme, and the only thing that would keep me sane and keep talking about coaching and football was to do things like as we are doing right now, Scott. And so for me, I'm explaining, you know, I do it with that group, and we can't tarnish all 10-year-olds the same, but that kind of 8, 9, 10, 11, 12-year-old, I see it in a long-term development plan. This is how I see it, and I talk about this all the time, so I'll be boring anyone who's listened to me before, but when I'm going in to work with a group, a team, a program, I just try and identify, right, where the majority of these players look as if they're on their journey. That I need to develop a love for football here, and see if they come back week in, week out. I've done my job, because over the years I can, you know, teach them a little bit more. You know, are we actually just going to be playing What's the Time, Mr. Wolf, and Duck Duck Goose and tag games and tail tig, and that's fine. And then the next step of the journey is, okay, do they love football, but they need to play more football? And that's the one that used to be around kind of organically in the environment with street football when it's disappeared. And that's the one that a lot of us as coaches, I think if we hold our hand up, or you might know someone, that's the one we miss out on, because we're so keen to do the next one, which is learn football. The players need to love football, play football, learn football. And unfortunately, I see a lot. These kids love football because they've played out the back garden with mum or dad. They've went to a mini kickers or footy tots program. They've then signed up for a team, and all of a sudden that coach is saying, right, let's play out from the back against a high press and 4-3-3, and, you know, you rotate in here. We need to build in that big chunk in the middle, which is let's let them play football. And Scoreboard Soccer will do that, but it will take away some of the barriers we've discussed about, you know, the same player getting loads of touches of the ball and some people not being engaged. So I would argue as well, in my experience, and I've got a background in an academy, I've got a background in recruitment, I've got a background in trials over in the United States for our academy. The longer you can spend in the love football, play football, the more competent they'll be to learn the game. You know, you'll be doing a playing out from the back session, but they'll actually be able to drive the ball in, and they'll be able to take it under control, and they'll be comfortable with it. And you just need to see where we're going to spend this long time. Now, the tough thing for coaches, and this is a conversation we have a lot, is if you just spend a lot of time in that play football one, you're going to have tough results. And this is probably why your FA, you know, Scottish FA, English FA, you know, other countries' FAs are telling you it's not about results then, because they're trying to, in my opinion, they're trying to get you to build a longer term model for when they do get up to that next stage. You know, so for me, yeah, in there, it's all about trying to play the game, because at the end of the day, it's very hard to teach people the game if you've not got a good gauge of where they are at the moment. Okay, we need to develop a love for the game, we need to see them play, and then we can maybe be best informed to actually teach them what they actually need to hear.
You phrased that so perfectly. I mean, I think this is something that we would all recognise out there, that you take these young kids on and who have a passion to want to play the game, but then we take them into a learning environment and forget about the play bit at times. And if you can find a way,
let me give you an example of that, Scott, if it's all right. And I won't name the academy because it was, you know, it was abroad, and it was during my time abroad. We would hold trials, and the kids would come in for 4 or 5 weeks and they play football. And the parents, if there's any parents listening, and the clubs, coaches that they came from, they're so eager to try and pinpoint why they never got selected and what they need to work on. Is it their left foot? Is it their right foot? Is it their scanning? Is it their first touch? And so often our biggest bit of feedback was they've just not played enough football. You know, stop driving yourself crazy with spending all this money on one-to-one sessions and what they need to work on. They've just not played enough football. And listen, they still have plenty of time. And I know one-to-one sessions, there's some great people that provide one-to-one sessions, and this is a different topic, but I remember so clearly saying to one of the dads, I almost said the program that I was working on abroad, saying to one of the dads, listen, good player, all these attributes, everything's just a little bit slow, a little bit laboured, he's just not played enough football. And the dad said, he does private lessons 4 times a week. And I'm like, well, there's 4 times a week that he's not playing football either.
Yeah.
Can he go and do these 3v3s, 4v4s, small-sided games? And I know there's a place for block practice, but that needs to be partnered with, constant, kind of goes all the way back to our first point, doesn't it? Constant transition, constant direction, opposition, goals, competition, and all the things that I'm kind of upselling Scoreboard Soccer a wee bit here. Keep them within that space for as long as you possibly can, and for as long as they're happy with it. Listen, communication's a two-way street. Two-way street. Sorry. If your players are in there and they're playing loads of a game-based approach and whatever, you can have that conversation with the player, and they might be ready to go and train with under 14s, under 15s, and do a wee bit more of that kind of stuff. But in my experience, so many of them are quite happy to get a good foundation of playing the game, because it will set them in such good stead. There's a documentary on BBC iPlayer from the Scotland national team in 1978, and there's an absolute bit of gold dust in there from Kenny Dalglish just saying, I never thought someone who played football in the streets of Glasgow would play at a World Cup in Argentina. And you're just like, well, that's why, because you just played the game without any adult intervention. Play the game. That's the bottom line, isn't it, Scott? For me,
100%. And I think we've strived over the last maybe 5 or 10 years to try and get some of that game back into like the learning environments, like especially academies. When you look at the class of '92 from Man United, I mean, that they all speak about the fact that really their football learning came from just playing out in the grassroots clubs or on the streets. Rooney says all the time he'd finish a game Man United and then go back out and play with his mates, that down where he lives, because that was, and he learned more from doing that because he could get on the ball and do lots of crazy stuff. So what it seems to me, David, that what you've taken is, this small-sided games-based approach that I think, we're embracing more and more, and rightly so. And you've just evolved it, and you've added on, an extra part to it, which, like I say, coaches can use that enables them to hopefully get the learning, but most importantly, to some extent, the playing within that practice. And that's what you've created here. And it sounds fantastic. You're fantastic. You're clearly passionate about it. If coaches want to know more or want to see resources, or if they want to take it, I mean, we're back out on the grass not too long, thank God. So I've been off now 3 months without probably coaching some football, and this has been the thing that's got me most excited about getting back into coaching again, embrace some of these concepts and trying them out in practice. But if we want to get some more before we get out, there's more information or guidance from you. What's the best way of going about that?
Yeah, I mean, the last point I'll make, because you've made a really good point there. A lot of our kids are coming off the back of a national lockdown. They've not socialised with friends for a year, let alone play some football. And I think there's a real worry, because I've been listening to these podcasts and I've been on the websites and I've been signing up for educational courses and I've learned so much. But let's remember, the kids are maybe coming back just to play football. You'll be desperate to do loads of wee things that you've learned and loads of drills that you've seen over the past year. But maybe and of course I would say this, wouldn't I? But maybe there's a place for Scoreboard Soccer and just small-sided games just to get them back into it. I think it's really important that we just let them be kids a wee bit when they first come back. So anyway, coach, they can get information from wherever they want, to be honest. I spoke on something similar to this recently, and somebody got in touch with me and said, would you come and do a wee kind of behind closed doors with my coaches, and we'll get 10 or 13 of them 10 or 15 of them on a call, and you can show some of the stuff. Absolutely. We can do a Zoom, I can share my screen, I can show you in a little bit more detail of what it's all about. The main source at the moment is probably just social media on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter at Coach David Baird. I'll share clips of the kids doing it, I share animations, I share session plans. That will kind of keep me afloat until I'm pulling together a kind of PDF resource similar to the Practice Through Play one, or the Future at Your Feet one, all the previous ones I've done. So yeah, just get me on Twitter, send me a private message and ask for the sessions, and I'll make sure I send them to any coaches that are interested.
Thank you so much. You've created something here which I know will be embraced. I think I know our listeners well enough to know that they'll love this kind of stuff. They'll love what you're speaking about, and it will resonate well with their players and things. And, it's something we have to work on and get good at and find ways to make it work. But I think you said keep it simple to start and then just build on it from that. But try these things out, and it can only be good for the players. Thanks so much. Before we let go, just a couple of final question, that's all right. I have to ask this because we asked all our guests, and I've been interested to know what your views are. If there was one thing you could change in the world of coaching, what might that be?
If there was one thing I would change in the world of coaching, I'm not too sure. Can I say, maybe quite a unique one to the Scottish Football Association and the Scottish culture? If there was one thing I would change, it would probably be the relationship between the Scottish Football Association and the general public, because there is a wee bit of a friction there, and they seem to get blamed for everything, and they do some terrific work. The Scottish Football Association coach ed resources and the same coach ed pathway that developed Mourinho and Sir Alex Ferguson and all these kind of people. It's such a terrific coach education pathway, and I know I'm obviously being quite political here because I work with the Scottish FA, but in my opinion, if everyone in Scotland pulled in the same direction, we would have been at a World Cup way before, last time obviously being 1998. I would love to change that selfishly here, because the pathway is great, and they've been banging the drum for a long time about, more games-based approach, develop a love for the game before you actually try and teach them the game. It's just unfortunately that the coaches who sign up and listen and do their coach education here in Scotland, they're maybe not the ones that need to hear the message. So if I could change one thing, again, selfishly, just because I'd love to see Scotland, perform at a higher level, I would improve the relationship between the governing body and the general public. And then anyone from Scotland who's listening will know exactly what I mean. I'd love them to realise that, if your son plays for a Scottish FA quality mark club, you are the Scottish FA. If you buy a ticket to go and watch a national team, you are the Scottish FA. If you support a club, St Mirren, Aberdeen, Motherwell, we're all Scotland, the country, and Scottish Football Association. They're both the same thing. We're all in it together. And sorry, that's a wee bit of a separate rant, but it is something I'm passionate about, is trying to help the game in this country in particular.
I think it's a good point, and I don't think it'll be isolated to Scotland. I think there'll be lots of countries saying something about the governing bodies and how they can, connect with the public a bit better. It can always be improved, right? However good they are, it can always be better than that. And I think we'd always want a bit more cohesion where possible. So hopefully it's heading in the right direction, and I'm sure with time it will. And then just finally, if it's okay, your plans. Obviously, you're busy, you do loads of stuff, you're doing lots at the moment, but what are your plans going forward?
I think the exciting thing is never really been too sure. I think I used to believe, and a lot of coaches will be the same, that find your niche and work hard at it. Whereas I'm probably starting to realise the more I can learn about the game, the better. So I mean, it was a fairly recent move that I started to work in the girls and women's game. So enjoyable, so rewarding, knocking down barriers and increasing the game. I've did a lot with the really young kids, the 4, 5s, and 6. Being the person who, I'm talking about my time in the States in particular, when you've got, baseball mums and dads and basketball and American football, being the person who actually introduced someone to kicking a ball for the very first time, loved it. So I've did the grassroots, I've coached a decent age group in the academy, I've coached semi-professional men's team. I guess my plans moving forward is trying to learn more about something else. I've did a couple of Zoom, para-football Zooms and Scottish Deaf Football Association. I'm doing a little bit of work on the side with visually impaired footballers to see if we can integrate them a little bit more into our programmes. So if any of your listeners want to network and engage and share some ideas, my plan is just to learn as much as possible, to be honest.
Sounds like a great plan, David. It sounds brilliant. Well, on that note, if it's okay, when you do learn more stuff and you have more ideas, because they're always fantastic, will you come on again and share them with us?
Yeah, absolutely. As I say, this time next week, I'll be already thinking about something else, and my sessions will already become dated. Look, that happens as well. The game's evolving so quickly. Every session plan I created 2 years ago, we're playing out from the back and having the defenders outside the box all of a sudden. Completely irrelevant. So it's good to keep up to date, isn't it? And it's good to listen to different opinions, different backgrounds, people with different views on the game. So thanks so much for the opportunity, Scott. It's been good. Completely our pleasure, David. Thank you so much for being such a wonderful guest. It's much appreciated. And look, best of luck with the little one. Best of luck with the coaching journey. And look, I hope we hear from you again, maybe in 6 or 12 months' time. You can tell us what the next revolutionary idea is going to be. No, I appreciate it, Scott. Thanks a lot.